Welcome to What is Going Om for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Whether you're aware of it or not, social media messes with your confidence and your self-esteem, with reports showing that it's not only responsible for a significant diminishment in feelings of self-worth and a sharp increase in depression, anxiety and self-consciousness, particularly in the under 25s, it's no surprise to find that books on how to build self-confidence and self-esteem are not only becoming more popular than ever, but also are becoming increasingly necessary. The problem is, how do you choose between them all? One book that stands out for me in terms of originality, authenticity and depth is one that approaches confidence from an angle I never would have expected. Transformational coach Sarah Main's entire life has been centered around studying, practicing and teaching higher consciousness and self-awareness. She's been an executive and transformational coach for 10 years, a school executive and a teacher of children and adults for 30 years, and a meditator and mindfulness practitioner for 40 years. Becoming aware of a growing need in the world, Sarah Main was inspired a few years ago to take all she's learned and reformulate it into a simple, enjoyable, and practical program of conscious confidence. Since then, she's expanded her conscious confidence program into a full-length book. Conscious Confidence, Use the Wisdom of Sanskrit to Find Clarity and Success. Sarah Main joins me now to share how a program derived from Sanskrit can help you establish a safe and secure reference point from which to see the world and make clear decisions on how to act, what to say, and how to feel. Sarah Main, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
It's good to have you, Sarah. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating book. I started it thinking, Sanskrit, how can that possibly help anybody? And then as I went through the book, oh, okay, I get this. This is pretty solid stuff. So let's just go back to the beginning and discover a little bit about you. Your life has been centered around ancient wisdom and Sanskrit since you were 10 years old. I'm bamboozled by how a 10-year-old has any interest in Sanskrit whatsoever. So tell us the story.
Well, look, I guess I just had a predisposition for it, but my parents came out from England to Australia in the 1950s after the war, and they were keen seekers, and they read a lot, all sorts of things, and they wanted more, they wanted wisdom, they were really searching and, still living just an ordinary life with a family and dad going to work and all that sort of thing. And then in the late 1960s, Dad discovered these philosophy and meditation classes, which, back in the 60s is an unusual thing, to say the least. Mm-hmm. And I can remember him coming home. Mum stayed to mind us. We were all young kids at the time, my siblings and I. Dad came home and he said, "This is it, I found it." And I, and then I could tell after that they used to discuss. Mum went along to the classes too, and there was such enthusiasm. They were right at the cutting edge of something, and I wanted that too. I wanted to be part of it. And when I was 10, I was offered the opportunity to go, and this was an adult class. And to be honest with you, I didn't actually understand specifically what they were talking about most of the time. Went over my head. But there was this chord or this energy, and I was absolutely in sync with it. And it was just really a matter of time that I got a bit older, and it was like tuning a radio to the signal, and I was old enough to understand and participate in the conversations. But whenever there were direct practices of mindfulness, or indeed when we were introduced to meditation, like I just connected with that straight away. That was easy. It was really the more adult conversation about the philosophy that I didn't get until I was a tiny bit older.
Well, looking at the practical philosophy, which combined Eastern wisdom with Western knowledge, you know, I would say that's a lot for a child of 10 to comprehend. I mean, it covered just about everything, didn't it?
Yeah, but the thing is, the essence of wisdom and philosophy is simple. They're first principles, they're abiding principles. And to be honest with you, a child can get them. They're easy. It's the complications over the top that we associate with them, but that's not it. It's not the wisdom itself. And better to get it as young as possible. They're simple principles. You know, fall still and remember who you are. A child can do that. That's easy. It's the adults who find it harder.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
You know, so I was blessed to be reminded. It's really more a reminder to be given that at 10 was just an untold blessing, really. You know, that's just one example. So, you know, the sort of more complex things, obviously, when you're a bit older, you pick them up more. But the simple principles, you can get them. A child can easily understand them.
Which is why you've used that in teaching children as a school teacher. I mean, what did you find was the most useful for you working with kids, you know, from your Sanskrit knowledge?
Oh, well, the power of presence and being conscious and aware is paramount. And so that came in many simple practical ways, but one of them was just feeling your feet on the floor, being present, and falling inwardly still and calm, and letting go of all the sort of thoughts that may be racing through the mind and the feelings and so on. Just be present, and then follow the knowledge that presents in the moment. And there's always some simple, immediate knowledge in the moment of exactly what to do, and to learn to follow that very simply, and not overthink it. Obviously, you know, you're an adult, so you're responsible, so it's never anything crazy. But I was never led astray by following that knowledge in the moment.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, what you're basically teaching children is that they've got it all inside them, aren't you?
Absolutely. It's really a case of reminding rather than putting in something that isn't there already. It's the way it was given to us as teachers was you give the simple principles of spiritual knowledge, and they need to be simple and principles, so something that doesn't change. And you give it simply enough, and it connects with the knowledge that's already within the child, and it's like it awakens that memory, and then that knowledge is available to the child. But it has to be given first to awaken it. It's like fructifying a seed or something, and then it's available to them. Otherwise, it lays dormant, as it were. So that's how we saw our role, certainly in that way. And it was good because you didn't feel like you had to put something in. It was just a case of reminding and awakening that within them.
Most people think of Sanskrit as just an ancient language or a collection of beautiful but incomprehensible sigils and symbols. But you describe it as the natural language of the universe. Explain Sanskrit to us and why you regard the study of it to be so valuable, especially now.
Well, there's different ways of appreciating Sanskrit. The word Sanskrita means pure and perfectly formed. And of course, there is the language which you can learn, and we certainly taught. I was instrumental in developing the first curriculum that we taught at school for the children. So they were actually learning the language, the vocab and some of the grammar and how to read and write and so on, which they loved. They enjoyed it. Some children found it tricky, but, you know, it was good. It's good to learn challenging things. It's good for the mind. So there's that side of things. And then, of course, there's the chanting and the more devotional side, which is very powerful because the language itself has an incredible potency in the very vibration and sound itself. So you have to be very careful how you pronounce it with care and precision, so that the purity of the vibration and the cleansing quality of that vibration can have maximum effect. And then another approach is really in the etymology and in what's contained in the language itself. There's, of course, the texts, but in the language itself, and I always found that fascinating, that in Sanskrit etymology is called nirukta, and I loved the way when we were studying in philosophy classes, when we were studying particular Sanskrit texts, and we'd take individual words and look into the wisdom in that very word. And that's really what opened my eyes from a young age to the wisdom that's actually in the language itself. And that's not something that's always considered, but there's just everything you need in the actual language. And the Sanskrit is the language of the universe. One way of considering it is that when we fall still and we hear that still small voice within that presents that knowledge in the present moment, that knowledge is always pure and perfectly formed. And Sanskrit means pure and perfectly formed. So we may hear that voice in the language that we're used to speaking, in my case, English, but before it's actually translated into English, that very vibration of that language is Sanskrita. It's pure and perfectly formed. That's another way of looking at it.
Mm. You use your program, which derives from your Sanskrit knowledge, to coach individual clients and even businesses and corporations. What sort of things are you typically finding yourself teaching people? You know, what are the characteristics, the traits that are most helpful to us that we seem to have forgotten and need help in remembering?
Yeah, look, with Sanskrit or without Sanskrit, it's the same issues.
Yeah.
Sanskrit just has an incredibly powerful clarifying effect, and I use Sanskrit really to help clarify the definitions that we have in our minds about all these things. And the key issues, it's as I've laid out in the book, it starts with addressing how conscious are we? Are we conscious or unconscious most of the time? So raising our awareness, so we're actually present to what we're doing in any given moment. That's why I wrote a chapter on that in the book. And then coming back to fundamentals within ourselves. So that chapter on values. There's a lot of talk about values, but approaching it from the Sanskrit point of view, Sanskrit talks about values in terms of that which you esteem and value, obviously, and that which you honour. And if you look at it from that point of view, we're always honouring and esteeming something from the moment we wake up in the morning. You know, the very first steps as we get out of bed to go and brush our teeth, right through the day to going to bed at night, we're honouring and valuing something every moment of the day. The question is, are we conscious and aware of what that is? Have we consciously chosen that? Or are we just running on habits and limits? And we're and therefore making choices based on that. So the fundamentals come back to values, and the values are these mighty forces such as generosity, magnanimity, service, love, care, respect. There's lots to consider there. But they're the fundamentals that connect us back to ourselves. What's important to us? What is actually key? And if you consider that, number one, and then what's our attitude, what's our state of mind? So we look at I look at what Sanskrit says about that, and it's just a way of orienting the attention and the mind and how we consider things and getting back to some fundamentals. It's good to go back to what the Sanskrit says about these things and just clarify our thinking.
Break now. You're listening to What Is Going On.
The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes' flagship radio show, What Is Going On. As a long-time editor, book judge, spiritual magazine publisher and radio host, I've read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors and teachers, so I know what's worth reading and what isn't. Now, with the spiritual book market growing increasingly crowded, more and more people are seeking my help in finding the authentic voices, the empowering tools, and the genuine skip the BS guidance that will make the most difference to their spiritual development. So I decided to make it easier by bringing my knowledge, experience, and considerable network of contacts together in the No BS Spiritual Book Club. There are no ads, no joining fees, no obligations, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library compiled by recognizable and respected names of the 10 best books that help them the most on their journeys, plus free book excerpts, audios, and live video interviews where you can quiz them about their spiritual journeys and their 10 best list choices. Your time and money are valuable, your spiritual journey even more so. If you're looking for genuine guidance from people who've walked this path before you, check out Sedgbeer.com. Click on the No BS Spiritual Book Club tab and join the club. That's Sedgbeer.com, SEDGBEER.com. I'll see you there.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #AloneTogether. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Sarah Main, you write about, and of course the title of the book, Conscious Confidence. What does that mean?
Conscious confidence is confidence that you have all the time. It's the confidence deeply connected within yourself. It's not conditional, what I would call unconscious confidence or conditional confidence, which is confidence that's dependent on external circumstances being a particular way for you to feel confident and able to handle the situation or able to move forward and do what you want to do or fulfill your potential and fulfill your dreams and go after your goals. I find a lot of people are held back by conditions apparently not being right, or there's some sort of disconnect within themselves that means they just can't quite find that strength to get moving and start doing what they want to do and fulfilling themselves and making their life full of interest and purpose. And conscious confidence is that confidence that you can draw on at any time. It's always present with you.
It says in the book that Sanskrit is truly unique among all the languages of the world, and that this ancient language upon which so many of our English words are based gives us an entire system to show what to do in order to experience the full meaning of a word. And it's really interesting, as I was going through the book, to think about words and how over centuries, fashions come and go, new words are invented. Words lose their power very easily. They become just words. And we don't think about the true meaning of those words. Often the meaning gets corrupted as well along the way, or co-opted to mean something else. How do you, is it a really difficult practice to be able to take apart those words and really look at the meanings of them and then translate it into something really practical, as you've done, to help people use the true meanings of those words in a down-to-earth, grounded way in their life to improve things?
That's an interesting question, Sandie. Look, it's not fundamentally difficult, but you do need to be shown how to do it, and you do need to practice. I think that's probably the most honest answer I can give you. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book. I thought, well, it's not fair. I've been at this for 40 years, and it's just kind of how I see things, and I don't know how to think any other way, because I was given this so young, and I appreciated it. I appreciated it as I was teaching for all those years and so on. But as I've even in the last few years, I thought, wow, I've just been given, I don't know how to describe it. It's like gold is like this most precious thing and so amazing. And I thought, how can I offer this to people in a way that they don't have to do 40 years of practice and study, basically. And it's got to be practical. Otherwise, all very nice to read it or whatever, but, what's the point? That was certainly, exactly. I was taught practical philosophy, and that meant you practiced every day. And, we all know for any transformation, you do have to practice. It's like if you want to learn the piano, you have to practice.
Yeah.
But the practices, I tried to make them enjoyable and practical and simple and approachable.
You have developed the fourfold energies of conscious confidence, which offers practical exercises. Tell us about those fourfold energies. What are they?
Yeah, there's focusing, uniting, simplifying, and energizing. FUSE. I call it the FUSE program, just for easy memory. So focusing is all the words describing confidence in Sanskrit. They fall quite naturally into four types of energies, four characteristics. And the first one is, and I put focusing first because you need to actually learn to pay attention. You need to be present. And that's not hard, but you do need to actually practice, particularly in this day and age with the distractions are legion. So focusing is learning to pay attention. And there are words like dridha pratyaya, which means firm confidence and conviction. Well, to have firm confidence and conviction, you need to be able to actually focus your attention and be decisive and determined. And faith, calm faith is part of that. Accessing higher knowledge, desiring higher knowledge. So there's elements of focus in there, giving your attention. And there's some great stories about that in that chapter. And then the next one is uniting, and that is very simply finding the common meeting point in every situation, which there is, because we can appreciate differences and not be stuck at the level of difference, because that leads to a lot of separation. We need to find the underlying unity, and we need to do that in ourselves first before we even attempt to do that in our normal outside life. Find the unity within ourselves, heal those differences within ourselves first. So that's focusing and uniting. Simplifying is just very simply not letting go of things that no longer serve us, that are no longer necessary. And that can be inwardly and outwardly. Go through your closet and clean out the clothes that you no longer use. Actually let go of that energy that's no longer serving you. So focusing, uniting, simplifying, and then energizing is taking decisive action. Actually do something. If you have a goal, actually get into action and take your next best steps, your first steps, to fulfilling and achieving that goal. So those 4 elements, to take that decisive action, you do need to pay attention. You need to be have a sense of integrity within yourself, that uniting where everything comes together and is not divided and scattered and separated. You need to let go of things that are getting in the way, and then you need to take action. And if you start rolling that out, you will find, you look back in a few months' time, you think, oh, yeah, some of those things that held me back before aren't holding me back, and you get a momentum going.
You've got some really interesting stories in there that illustrate some of the concepts that you're talking about and addressing in certain chapters. What is your favourite story?
I love the one in the focusing chapter. I have traditional stories, and then I have contemporary accounts of actual people. I think one of my favourite stories is the story of Arjuna, and this is from the Mahabharata, and he's being taught to pay attention. All the princes are learning archery, and their teacher puts a straw bird in a tree, and he lines them all up, and he gets them to point their bow and arrow, and he says, what do you see? And some of them say, well, I see the tree and the bird, and he dismisses all those princes. And then Arjuna, who's the greatest archer, he says, what do you see? And he says, I see only the eye of the bird. That's all I see. And he says, shoot your arrow, and the arrow takes the head of the straw bird off. And that's illustrating that single-pointed, undivided attention. And I love that story. And I've told that to children, and they love it too. It's a great story for children to learn.
Well, here's a story that, that reminds me of, that I really liked. And that was the teacher who came into the class and confounded his students by telling them that they were going to have a test. Tell us that one, because it's kind of like a counterpoint to the one you've just told.
Oh, yeah. Is that the one about the dot on the page?
Yes.
Yeah. The teacher comes in and says, right, you're going to have a test, and there'd been no prior announcement of this. So what, test, huh? What, we haven't studied. And he hands out a piece of paper with a black dot on a white piece of paper in the middle of the page. That's all. And he says, write what you see. And so, of course, eventually the students settle down and start writing. And then afterwards he gets them to read out what they've written. And they, all describing the black dot and this and that and the other. And then he said, it's all a matter of perspective, basically, that most of the page is unmarked by anything, and then you get this single dot, which often takes our attention. And in this case, I think the students in great detail describe the dot. And he uses that as an illustration of the importance of attitude and where our focus is, because we can put our attention on the problems that get in the way, but often they are not, they're only just part of the scene, and often a very minor part of the scene. And if we're not focusing on solutions, we'll just be focused on the problem the whole time. And the dot represents the problem, but we just tend to see that and zero in on that rather than sort of helicoptering out and seeing the bigger picture and the perspective that actually most of the time things are going quite well, and then we just have this problem that requires a solution, but we get obsessed on the problem. I think is that a fair enough assessment of the story?
Yeah, it is, and I really enjoyed the way the teacher taught that particular lesson. But it is, and there are other stories that basically tell you this, point to the same thing. But I found that one particularly interesting. The book teaches us so much. I mean, it talks about what Sanskrit can teach us about values, and values are something that I think people are in danger of losing. There is so much pressure on us all now, so much information, so many different contradictions, and we're seeing an erosion of values in society. So I think this is a particularly pertinent one for today. Could you just speak a little bit about how Sanskrit can help us regain our understand our core values and regain our sense of values?
Yes, well, it's my favourite topic, actually. I took two words from Sanskrit that refer to values, and the first one's mulyam, and that refers to like the fundamental value. It's the root and the origin, like a plant growing up. It's got to have really firm roots. We look at a plant that's thriving, we just subconsciously know that, of course, the roots are strong. If a plant isn't thriving, then the roots must be weak. We understand that with a plant, but we don't necessarily understand that with people, children or young people. If they're not thriving, then there's something fundamentally amiss. So that's the point with mulyam, being at the root or the origin. And the other one is argha, and that's to do with worth or price, and honour and worship. And one of the examples is the respectful reception of a guest. So if you have at home and you have a special honoured guest coming, you put out the best, you get out the best cups, and you make every effort to give them everything that they want, and you take care of them. And if you consider your heart like your home, what honoured guest are you welcoming into your heart every day? And if you consider that in relation to values, are we welcoming the very best into our heart every day? And if you consider the root and origin, and then the sort of what you honour and worship, those two aspects of values are very potent concepts that can enliven our understanding of what values are. And then one way of looking at these values is that they are mighty energies in the universe. They're great powers. They're not just mental concepts. So the power of generosity, the power of service, the power of kindness, the power of courage, the power of generosity and magnanimity. These are just, a few examples of values. Which one do you connect with? The power of integrity and truth and honesty, the power of dignity and respect. All of these great qualities are incredibly powerful. And if we actually just connect with even 1, 2, or 3 of them and consciously try and bring those into our life every day. So we speak to people with kindness or with respect. That takes energy, and it takes discipline, and it takes focus. These are not just nice concepts if you're really serious about it. And I tell you, if you bring those great powers into your life, it transforms your whole experience.
I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is transformational coach and Sanskrit scholar Sarah Main, author of the book Conscious Confidence, Use the Wisdom of Sanskrit to Find Clarity and Success. We'll be back with more from Sarah Main after the break.
the cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
I'm Fidel Mshombo. I was born in a city called Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Sarah Main, at the age of 8, standing on the back step of your home, you had what many would term as a numinous experience that has affected you and, I would imagine, guided you throughout your entire life. Would you share that experience with us?
Yeah. Standing on the back doorstep at home, I think it was summer. I remember it being warm, and I looked up, and it was really like a call, a real universal call, and a great sense of expansion beyond just being, an 8-year-old girl standing on the back step at home. It was a real, just complete expansion into a vast being. And I felt this very strong call and direction. And there was no fear, and yet there was a lot of awe, AWE kind of awe and wonder. Very strong, very powerful. And, then I remember being in that for, it seemed like a long time, may have only been moments, I don't really know. But certainly it has guided me all through my life. And I feel what I'm doing now is conscious confidence is a direct expression of that. It feels like that was, in a way, what I was called to do. Although I don't feel like I'm on a mission as such. It just feels like it's giving expression to what I was called out to. If I can put words on something that's almost indescribable.
Yeah. I think when one thinks about, the average person thinks about Sanskrit, if they think about it, or they come across a book like yours, or a business person, or someone who has a problem is looking for some coaching and some solutions. Sanskrit's not the first thing that they would think of, because it requires a story to tell them how it's going to help them. I'm curious to know that, you do consult with businesses, and you do coaching sessions with individuals. Do you find it difficult having to explain to them how this is going to help them? Or do you find that people are just gravitating towards it somehow without understanding, what it is or how it's going to help them?
Look, there can be a point where they just think, what? That's why I wrote that magazine article it's in various publications called, "Excuse me, did you say Sanskrit?" That's why I actually wrote that title, because if people don't say it, they certainly, their face looks like they're thinking it. look, yes and no. I think people are interested and intrigued. And look, to be honest with you, I'm not handing out Sanskrit lessons and I'm not hammering it. But I say, look, let's just consider at a different level. We know we need to work on our attitude, for example, and we need a positive attitude. What Sanskrit says about attitude is blah, 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 blah. So consider this, and then you can start talking. But by just putting the Sanskrit up front, it just sets a whole new orientation to the conversation. It's really that. And then it's just a different perspective, a different platform, a different scale of consideration. It often, I find, because I've found this myself, it takes you out of your normal limited level of thinking to something far greater. And Sanskrit does that because it offers you universal knowledge. And so, like I say, you don't have to spend 20 years studying Sanskrit. It's just a way of actually reorienting your thinking. And in some cases, clarifying the very definitions that you walk around with in your head all the time and unconsciously refer to and act from, speak from and act from. So you're basically shifting perceptions. Yeah, exactly. But using Sanskrit, which has innate, it's pure and perfectly formed, so it has this innate power. It really, it's the lazy man's way of doing it because it does the work for you. It's, you just present it and there it is. You go, oh, yeah. Yeah, so, what we're seeing today in the world, you wrote a great blog, in which you talk about how somebody asked you, so, how do you turn to Sanskrit when your life turns pear-shaped? And that is happening for so many people right now. And, we are at what I call, a choice point. And it's a major choice point, I think, not only for us individually, but, for humanity as a whole. And there's a lot that Sanskrit can teach us about choice. Would you like to say something about how it can help us right now as we navigate this just incredible time that we're living in? Yeah, yes. The orientation to the wisdom in Sanskrit is really just the orientation to just clarifying our direction, our approach, our very basis of thinking and considering things and going back to the first principles of timeless wisdom. I use the word timeless rather than ancient because it is wisdom that's genuinely universal, which means if something's universal, it's relevant anywhere at any time in any circumstance. If something isn't relevant at a certain point, then it isn't universal. And that always appealed to me right from young, that something could be completely relevant all the time. I loved that. And returning to wisdom that has stood the test of time and that it is based in first principles, it seems is necessary now, and I think particularly grounded in the values and learning to make better choices. And I refer to choice in the book, and it comes down very simply to something that you honour. And we don't think of that. When we make a choice, the thing we choose at that time, Sanskrit indicates that we're actually honouring something. Well, one would think that it'd be better to actually make choices consciously rather than unconsciously if we're actually honouring something. And we don't think of that. Sanskrit's very precise, and that's part of why it clarifies everything. Because when you appreciate some new piece of knowledge from Sanskrit, it's always utterly precise and describes exactly what goes on. It's just most of the time we don't know it. And that's another reason for the Sanskrit is so powerful, and we don't need too much of it, just something to bring some light and clarity into our lives. And as you say, we are at a point where I think, everyone, we do well to actually come back to some first principles. Absolutely.
I'm especially interested in what's happening with our young folk today. Not only do they have this behemoth, the internet, which is, having so much influence over everything about them. I watch my own grandchildren and how they're so influenced by the influencers, or I have to look this way, or if I'm not wearing that or looking like this, then, there's something wrong with me. And the many knocks that their confidence and their self-esteem takes. And, being an adolescent is hard enough without all of that added to it. So, I would have thought that your program on, confidence building would be an incredible gift to schools and colleges.
Yes, I mean, I too am concerned about young people. I think the internet and social media in particular, and influences and the rise of all of that sort of thing, it just keeps the focus outward the whole time, and there's this disconnect with themselves. An actual connection, getting the roots deep within themselves. And that's the mulyam in the values, is that the roots back in themselves. So they actually have a sense of self. And we, starting there, and then sure, look at the internet and all of that sort of thing, but you have it, you're viewing it from a point of view of connection in yourself. And this is very practical, but it does need to be nurtured, and it can very easily get covered over. I grew up in just a normal teenager like everyone else, but I did have this incredible blessing of meditation and some Sanskrit and some wisdom. And when things were difficult as a teenager, I had real resources within myself to refer back to. And I just knew that this was passing. It was not who I really was, and so on and so forth. And I could just even chant a little bit of Sanskrit in my mind when things were difficult. And, it just takes you to another level of consciousness. And these are simple things. They're all, even if they don't learn any Sanskrit, it's just getting back to some really solid knowledge about how to connect with themselves is missing, I think.
Well, it's interesting how many of the young, and I was reading an article about this just the other day, are choosing, and I think you've mentioned it yourself in your book, choosing to have tattoos with, because they look pretty, but it's Sanskrit. Or they like a particular saying, so they're wearing it, So, you wouldn't have to go too far to say, hey, look at this aspect as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've been, and I put it in the book, my husband and I have been at cafes and things, and all ages, all over all around the world. We've been overseas in a cafe. Like we were in Kansas City once, and the lovely young woman served us a cup of tea, and she had this saying tattooed up her arm in Sanskrit. And I said, oh, you got Sanskrit. And she said, and she looked and said, oh, yeah. And I said, what, can you read it? She said, oh, no, I just like the look of it. I know it meant something really nice, and that's why I chose it. And I was amazed that she would have put that lasting thing on her arm, and she had no idea really what it said. She couldn't even remember the meaning. It just was good at the time, but she was drawn to it. And she said she loved the shape of the letters and so on. I mean, I read it for her and I recognised the saying and I could translate it for her, but, it wasn't difficult. But, and that has happened a lot, and it amazes me. And, of course, there's famous examples of celebrities with tattoos, Sanskrit tattoos, and engraving in their wedding bands and all sorts of things like that. So there is this sort of unconscious draw towards something that's more meaningful, that's deeper, that fulfills a need and gives meaning. And often the Sanskrit, when presented, will have that attractive energy to it.
Yeah, and you think about, the incredible popularity of Miten and David Female and their Sanskrit chants, etc. I think there's an opportunity here for you to write a book aimed at that generation. I can imagine it would be incredibly well received.
Well, I'm actually doing some research for a second book at the moment. On a whole lot of themes around some of these mighty qualities and what Sanskrit says about them.
Yes.
Yeah, because I've written a series of magazine articles and blogs, and my shows every month are on. I've done love, patience, strength, beauty, and I'm working on dignity and respect at the moment. What Sanskrit says about them. So,
The power of words, yes.
The power of words, because really language determines our whole life experience.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time. I do want to ask you about your free Design Your Own Alignment plan that our listeners can go to your website and take advantage of. Tell us about it.
Yes, it's 2 short videos and some downloadable worksheets, PDF worksheets. And it's based around the Sanskrit word santulana, which means balance. And the one model of understanding what a human being is a human being has a body, a mind, a heart, and a spirit. And if you understand them as bodies, we have a physical body, a mental body, an emotional body, and a spiritual body. And if you understand all the bodies like we understand the physical, we know a physical body needs food, exercise, and rest in the right balance and the right measure, then all the bodies, our mental body, our emotional and our spiritual body, need food, exercise, and rest so that we feel whole, integrated, and in alignment and balanced. It's really understanding what food, exercise, and rest is for the mental, emotional, and spiritual, in particular physical body. There's plenty of information about that. It's just a case of the measure of how much and what type, and that's up to the individual, of course, and that changes. But for the mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies, a lot of the problems we see is because people are not actually feeding their mental body, feeding their emotional body, exercising their mental body, exercising their emotional body properly, and then resting those bodies properly. And we designed our curriculum at school around these principles so that the children had food, exercise, and rest for all the bodies. And if you approach it like that, then it makes perfect sense that you can care for the whole person.
Yeah, very enlightened. I have to congratulate you. There are a gazillion books out there on building self-confidence, and I've seen a lot of them, and after a while they all meld into one another. The fact that you've come up with a book that is so deep and is so profound and so authentic and has such a great weight of history behind it, is truly well, it's delightful. It's delightful to come across something so original. So, Sarah, thank you for that. And thank you for being with us on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Sandie. That's so kind of you. It's been great.
Yes, it's been fun. Thank you. Sarah McMain, I look forward to speaking with you again when your next book comes out.
Thanks so much.
So, Conscious Confidence, Use the Wisdom of Sanskrit to Find Clarity and Success, is published by Inner Traditions, and it's available in paperback on Kindle and as an audio recording. And for more information about Sarah, visit her website at consciousconfidence.com, where you can also check out her Conscious Confidence radio show and, of course, take advantage of that free design. Sandie Sedgbeer. You can learn more about me and the No BS Spiritual Book Club and what I offer outside of this show at sedgbeer.com. In the meantime, I'll be back with another edition of What is Going On at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me.